Right. So we're just gathering here in the centre. Oh, is it broadcasting the YouTube sound? Just gathering here in the centre. If you could make sure that's turned off. No, just so you. Is it broadcasting the YouTube sound? Oh, maybe it's this, is it? Just gathering here in the centre. If you could make sure that's turned off. Well, that sounds. So I think we're okay now. So sorry about that. Sometimes there is a bit of, if it is coming through YouTube, there will be a little bit of a delay. Well, that sounds. So second half now, and we've got, as I say, our special guest Lalitaraja, who you've already been introduced to through his meditation teaching, and I really thought that was lovely to have such an embodied teaching of meditation, to do it through the body, and the Buddha taught in this way as well. In fact, I heard these wonderful echoes of the Buddha's own teachings on mindfulness in what Lalitaraja was doing there, which was really beautiful, I thought. And the Buddha definitely wanted the body and its movements to be the beginning of your way into mindfulness. And mindfulness is going to be our theme in the second half. And we've reached this point because we've been going through a sequence looking at the Buddhist advice on how to live a meaningful life, a life that makes a difference. And that is the precepts. And this all fits into the basic 3 different kinds of training in Buddhism. The training in how you live your life, which is ethics, the training in how you work on your mind, which is meditation, and the training on how you see reality itself, how you see the way things fit together, which is wisdom. And so we'll have a bit more on those in the future, but now we've reached the 5th of the 5 precepts that look at how to live your life. We've looked at the precept of love or of kindness, avoiding causing any harm as the first precept. We've looked at the precept of generosity, avoiding taking what is not given. We've looked at the precept of contentment and peace, and avoiding sexual misconduct, that is misconduct through your neediness or your desire. And we've also looked at integrity and avoiding untruthfulness and misleading people. So now we get to the mindfulness precept, the 5th precept, which I'll leave Lalitaraja to go into. Yes, Lalitaraja, I remember seeing him doing some dance demonstrations and dance movements, and it does seem to me that it's wonderful to have somebody who is a dancer teaching mindfulness, because they're bound to realise what is necessary in order for one to get into one's body properly. I'm only sorry that we can't have him here doing a little dance demonstration sort of thing, but there you go. I don't think I'll say any more really about Lalitaraja. I love listening to his voice, I love listening to him teaching, and I'm really looking forward to what he's got to say on something that he really knows something about, which is this whole issue of mindfulness. So over to Lalitaraja.
Thank you, Ratnaprabha. So here we are, the 5th precept. So I'm going to, at various points today, I'm going to unpack some of the Pali language words that we've translated to get these precepts. So there's the refrain, which is Veramani Sikapadam Samadhyami. So all I wanted to say about that is it simply means I undertake the training. I undertake the training to, whatever is happening in each precept. So I think that's quite important, that we are undertaking a training and not simply following moral commandments, that we have to work out these principles in our lives. I'm sure somebody has said that already in one of the previous talks, but it can't be said enough. So today we're looking at undertaking to abstain from intoxicants, undertaking the training principle of abstaining from intoxicants which cloud the mind, and instead practicing mindfulness, clear and radiant. So the Pali is Suramerya, Majja, Pamadatana. And I'll tell you a little bit about what all that, how that breaks down, because it's a little bit of the geek in me that likes to kind of unpack these things. But I think it can be really helpful to kind of go back and look at the etymology of things and try and figure out what, because it's 2,500 years ago that these precepts were being taught, and they've come down to us, and the Pali language has come down to us, and they've come to us in the Pali form. We don't know what language the Buddha actually spoke. So the first precept underpins the tone of all the others, love, as Lalitaraja said. It requires kindness, or at least kindness makes it easier to practice all the other precepts. So in a way, that first precept underpins all the others. At the other end of the list, we find the practice of mindfulness, as opposed to intoxication. So mindfulness is also required to practice all the other precepts. It could be argued that they all interconnect in many ways, these 5 precepts, but it struck me while preparing for this talk that this beginning with metta and ending with mindfulness was somehow indicative of the practice of ethics in general. If metta is the engine of ethical practice, then mindfulness would be the steering wheel. Okay. So I was on a retreat with Kamala Sheila some years ago and having a meditation review. It was a Buddha field retreat. We were in a field, and I wanted to take my meditation practice deeper. I was meditating every day and doing quite a bit of meditation, but I didn't seem to be able to. I didn't feel that I was making much progress. And we talked for a little while, and he pointed out something about the 3 trainings: ethics, meditation, and wisdom. And he said, well, if you want to take your meditation deeper, you need to sort out your ethics. And he said, I don't mean ethics in the sense of what precepts you're following and how you're following. What I mean is this word shila, this Pali word sila, as meaning how you give your life shape. Right, the shape of your life, the conditions in your life that you're creating that might support your practice. And we've noted that I had a full-time job. I was trying to do a PhD at that time. I was teaching at the centre 1 or 2 nights a week. I had a new girlfriend. And it's like, oh, yeah, of course you're not going deeper in meditation. You're doing all these other things. So. And it wasn't that I wouldn't be able to take my meditation practice deeper. It's just that I wouldn't be able to take it. If I wanted to go in that direction over there, well, my hand's disappearing. I would have to change the shape of my life in order to facilitate that. So I think that in terms of thinking about ethical practice, how we think about how you're giving your life shape. And what that shape supports, what it can support and what it can't support. So I dropped the PhD, and I was able to be more realistic about what I could do with the life that I had. And I have made some other changes, some shifts. But I'm still working full time in a university teaching dance, but I'm much more content with the balance of my life. So let's look at the 5th precept. Is sobriety the opposite of intoxication? So that was the first question that I wrote down. Well, is sobriety the opposite of intoxication, or is it mindfulness? You know, what are we actually dealing with here? So let's look at intoxication on its own. And here I'm going to go into the Pali a little bit. So the Pali words are Sura Merya, Majja, Pamadatana. So Sura Merya, Sura is fermented liquors made with powdery substances. Merya is distilled liquors made with nectar. Right, so various kinds of liquors. Majja is simply an intoxicating drink. So he's really is talking about alcohol here. It seems, but the general principle of intoxication is what we need to bear in mind. So pamadatana, the root word is mada, pamada, mada, which means intoxication. The prefix pamada, so pa is a prefix meaning to go forward, perhaps further than you need to excess. So if mada is drunkenness, then pamada is blind drunk. I quite like that. But I stole that from Jayarava. He was talking. I saw on his website he was talking about these words. Tana just means state or condition. So avoiding a state of pamada, drunkenness, by avoiding liquor of various kinds. So that's the Pali. But what about our experience? I'm not actually teetotal at the moment, and I was for many years. But I've probably drunk less than 3 units of alcohol in the last 16 months. And that's kind of the way I like it. I consider myself a lightweight, and that's how I like it. There is that first few sips of a glass of wine that could be called pleasant, warming, relaxing. But this has a lot to do with where I'm at the time. Alcohol is a mood enhancer. So if I'm on a downer, it could equally take me into wallowing, painful place. And I know from experience that it does this. Even if in that wallowing there is an anesthetic effect, it's still going to enhance the unpleasant state. But in both situations, I've taken a sidestep from actually happening in experience. I've got my experience as it is has been slid to one side. As a teenager, I drank a lot before moving on to other intoxicants. And they all had this quality of sidestepping what was present before me. In my 20s, I remember seeing a TV comedy. I think it might have been one of the Comic Strip Presents crew, where the planet was suffering from a pandemic of fantasy flu. And it struck me that being drunk or stoned on a regular basis was like this. You might have infected with fantasy flu, a pandemic of fantasy flu. And I was intoxicating daily for a period in my early 20s. And what caused me to stop was meditating. And when I started to meditate, it wasn't like suddenly think, right, I've got to stop getting intoxicated, but I'm meditating. It's actually just after a while I realized that I was getting up in the morning and trying to practice mindfulness, but if I'd been drinking the night before, then my mindfulness was compromised. It was harder to do, and I was really enjoying the meditation, so I just kind of stopped taking intoxicants. There's the de-inhibiting side of alcohol, which used to help me out at parties as a young man, and this has led me to say many thoughtless, stupid, and sometimes hurtful things over the years. And when I look back at all the unskillful things that I've ever done, I can say that most of them happened under the influence of some intoxicant or other. That my appraisal of the situation was skewed and my response is inappropriate. It's not that I haven't been unskillful in sober states, just that it's much less frequent. Much less frequent. So I've got this little quote from the Buddha. It's from the Vipaka Sutta. You don't need to remember which sutta that is. But he just says this: the most trivial result of men drinking alcoholic liquor is that it leads to madness. Right? he says that's the most mild, most trivial result of taking alcohol, is it leads to madness. It's quite a statement. So there's something about that, the madness of like getting into dependent and addictive tendencies. Like, you know, he's kind of talking about like you're not right in the head, like madness. You're not right in the head, and you know, getting into the dependent and addictive tendencies that come with, you know, intoxicants. It's not hard to extrapolate out from my own mild dependent behaviors, you know, with various substances in my early 20s to larger problems. Fortunately, I didn't fall into the addictive tendencies some of my friends did, and quite a few of them are dead now. I consider myself very fortunate that something in me steered away from all of that. But others have found out this too late. Some are dead, but others end up in recovery. And over the years, I've, you know, there are, you know, you will encounter people in recovery at Buddhist centers because it's a way of, you know, it is an effective way of moving in the right direction. But what I find is, you know, for people in those kind of addictions, it's life or death. Right? And their commitment to practice is something that I find draws out the best in me. You know, it asks me to step up and, you know, sort of meet them there in that place of commitment and, you know, really having to do it. If we only had to think about drugs and alcohol, most of us could quite easily establish skillful boundaries. You know, and perhaps most of us already do. But are these things the only intoxicants that we need to think about? Social media is designed to be addictive. Once they found out about the little dopamine hit that happens when you press a like button, or that you get likes, they were all over this. Every social media platform has a form of like button. YouTube and other platforms are grooming us to stay on the platform and then selling our captured attention to advertisers. And I don't know, I had a thing some years ago. I was looking for a slightly obscure 1980s Tulsa-based rock band, you know, in the J.J. Cale vein. Probably nobody here. Well, probably a few of you will know who he is. Rockin' Jimmy and the Brothers of the Night. They were on the Old Grove Whistle Test one time, and I bought their album. It was great, but they've never released the CD because the guy who ran the group just got fed up with touring, fed up with the music industry, and just left and hasn't released the recordings. So I mean, you know, I found myself sometimes sort of trawling the internet trying to find out if somebody has a bootleg recording, or it's on YouTube or somewhere I can get a hold of a decent copy. And you do that for a couple of hours, and you feel pretty grotty. You know, something, you know, that sort of surfing and trying to find the thing, and each time you get a lead, you get a little dopamine hit, right? It's really addictive, and you can just find yourself, you know, I think, you know, particularly through looking for this band, I sort of noted actually I really need to not be doing this for hours at a time. But for all of us, whether our intoxicant of choice is alcohol or something else, or social media, box sets, or something else, it's still about choosing life or death. It may not feel as extreme to us as it does for an addict, you know, somebody who's acknowledged their addiction. But, you know, every time we're intoxicated, we're adrift from our life force. And I think that, for me, that's a real sort of key thing. You know, if I'm intoxicated, I've drifted away from my central life force. And what meditation does is it brings me into connection with my life force. I think that's, you know, that's something I very much experienced when I started meditating. You know, that's like getting your head together, getting your energies together, and being, you know, and being able to move in the direction of choice in one's life. So what of sobriety, or this mindfulness, clear and radiant? So when I was preparing the talk, I was looking for, because each of the negative precepts, undertaking to abstain from something, has a positive counterpart. And I was looking online, I was looking at the translation websites. I was looking all over the place trying to find the words, the Pali words that they use for the positive precepts. And so I asked Ratnaprabha because I couldn't find them, and he said, "Oh no, Sangharakshita wrote those." so then I was going, well, what did Sangharakshita have in mind? So probably what he did was look at this word pamada, that is it, pamadatana, pamada, blind drunkenness. So if you add a negative prefix to pamada, right? So so there's another prefix we can say apamada. We have a word that is usually translated is heedfulness or mindfulness or diligence. In fact, the dying words of the Buddha are supposedly, all things are impermanent, with mindfulness strive on. So that's the usual sort of translation. But the word he uses is apamada. So it's and because it's a negative prefix on this word meaning intoxication, sobriety, heedfulness, mindfulness, sort of brings them all together. Positively, it's a state of non-intoxication or sobriety which results in a calm body and concentrated mind. And this enables one to see things as they really are and to be liberated from suffering. So that's a little quote from that page of Jayarava's that I found where he was talking about apamada. Non-intoxication, sobriety, which results in a calm body and a concentrated mind. A calm body and a concentrated mind enables one to see things as they really are. So Buddhism sort of has this idea that, our suffering, our existential suffering, is caused by being unrealistic about life. Right? We live our lives as if they're permanent, that we're going to live forever, and we don't. We all die in the end. So, but if we live our lives in the knowledge of death, actually, it's a liberating thing. It creates freedom. I mean, there's a lot more I can say about that, but that's another talk. So I was listening to a talk from Viveka, an older member who's done a lot of retreats on mindfulness, and she said in a talk I was listening to, most awareness is a gross generalization of experience. Most awareness is a gross generalization of what's happening in experience. Right? So the brain does this. Right? It creates this gross generalization in order to save energy, in order to enhance our survival chances. That's how we've evolved, and thank goodness it did. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here. But if we want to, if you want to sort of engage in spiritual practice, if we want to sort of go further with our ethical practice, with our meditation practice, and become wiser, then we need to get past this gross generalization and get a little bit of, and to know things a little bit more clearly, to a little bit more clarity, a little bit more precision, a little bit more detail. So what does mindfulness facilitate? What does heedfulness and diligence facilitate? Apamada, what does it facilitate? What's the payoff of doing mindfulness meditation? Well, one thing that comes immediately to mind with regard to ethical practice is that it facilitates choice. Without awareness, we're just going to operate from that gross generalization. And we'll act out from our habits, our conditioning, our biases, what we've been taught, what we've been told. But as soon as we pay attention, there is the possibility of choice. It's a creative moment. It's a creative moment that we can engage with our life, and instead of reacting out of habit, we have the possibility to shape the next moment, and the next moment, and the next moment. Yeah? So this isn't to suggest that we live our lives in a state of hypervigilance. That's not what's being suggested here. In the meditation I led earlier, I was sort of trying to emphasize that actually to practice mindfulness, it's quite a relaxed, easygoing state. It's not a kind of, it's not a forceful, hypervigilant thing. That's not very effective, actually, cultivating wisdom. In fact, applying the principle of the practice, in fact, applying the practice of mindfulness to our ethical practice requires an easeful open state. We need to use our mindfulness in training a sensibility. Right? We need to train a sensibility, almost an aesthetic choice making that is averse to unwise decisions. Right? So, using this foundation of ethical practice to deepen our meditation practice, and one of the things that we want our meditation practice to do is to live more wisely. And that's one way we thought. Lalitaraja mentioned the 3 trainings earlier. Ethics, meditation, wisdom. If we want to live more wisely, we need to make wise choices, and we need to develop a sensibility that is averse to unwise choices. The more our choices lead us to face towards what is actually happening in our experience of the world more realistically, right? Living our life, facing towards our experience more realistically, we will live more realistic, and we will suffer less. And that is what I have found. That's why I am a Buddhist, because when they said that to me at the Buddhist Center, I thought, okay, let's try this, let's see if it works, and it seemed to work. So I'm still here, all these years later. In the Buddha's key teaching of mindfulness, I mentioned in the Satipatthana Sutta, near the beginning, he says, so he's talking about the practice of mindfulness. And it's a really key teaching. It's very, very influential. It's still widely studied, practiced. It's a key text. But he says at the beginning, monks, this is the direct path for the purification of beings, for the surmounting of sorrow and lamentation, for the disappearance of suffering and discontent, for acquiring the true method, and for the realization of nibbana, awakening. And it all comes down to the practice of mindfulness, applied to all aspects of our life. So if we take on the training of abstaining from intoxicants that cloud the mind, there's no point in doing, just becoming teetotal for its own sake. That isn't what we're advocating. What we're saying is to become sensitive to the effects of intoxication, how that shapes our lives, and to make wise choices about how we do that. And that might lead you to becoming completely teetotal. It might lead you to abandoning social media altogether. Probably a very good thing to do. But it's not saying you should do this. It's saying develop a sensibility. Figure out what you need to do to support your practice. Okay, that's what I wanted to say, and that's taken exactly the amount of time that I thought it should take. So we're going to split into groups in a moment, or we're going to have some sort of discussion forum. So what do I need to do next?
Bernadette can look after the groups, but have you got any thoughts as to what kind of things the groups might want to look at?
Thank you for the reminder, Ratnaprabha. I have some questions and I've typed them down, so I need to find. Okay, so I have some suggested questions that I'll type up for you in a minute. I've already typed them, but I accidentally closed the document. So, what is the relationship between sobriety and mindfulness? I sort of hinted at a few things, but what does that mean? How do you know when you're intoxicated? How do you know when you're intoxicated? How do you know when you're being mindful? And how does intoxication impact on the other precepts for you? Or, if you're not a Buddhist or you're not really familiar with the precepts, how does intoxication impact on how you give your life shape? Really, that's the central issue. How does intoxication impact on how you shape your life? So let me just go ahead and find that document.
Shall we start the groups now, Lalitaraja, or shall we wait for your questions to appear?
Questions should be appearing. Oh no, hang on. I need to send that to everyone. Here we go. Here are the questions in the chat, and I'll put if I can. I think that's all right. You should be able to find them there once you're in your groups.
I think we said 15 minutes, didn't we? If you can, yeah. Here we go.
Do you need to close the YouTube channel? Or is that open?
Bernadette's got lots to do, but she's about to close the YouTube channel as well, yeah.